Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Shifting Your Events Online During COVID-19. For those of you who are returning Candid webinar participants, a warm welcome back. And to those of you who are joining for the first time, I'm so glad that you're joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Cevada, and I'm a program specialist here at Candid. And I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar. And given that today's topic focuses on online events, I'll be modeling some best practices that we use for our webinars here at Candid. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I want to share with you that a bit about our organization. Last year, GuideStar and Foundation Center came together to form a new single organization called Candid. Together, we have over 88 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. Every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world. Candid finds out where that money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. Through research, collaboration, and training, Candid connects people who want to change the world with the resources that they need to do it. You can learn more about what it took to become Candid in our very first annual report, and we'll be sharing the link to the report in the chat in just a moment. We also want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of Candid's learning community. With the evolving coronavirus crisis, we know it's a challenging time for everyone. Therefore, we are redoubling our efforts to share resources and information that will help us get through this crisis together. This webinar is one of many programs that have resulted from our efforts at Candid to better serve you. You can learn more about the changes in our programming, how to stay connected with us, and our free resources by visiting the link on the screen. Again, we'll be sharing this in the chat in just a moment. I also want to take a few moments to go over how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should hopefully see something similar on your screen. By default, you're listening in using your computer's audio. And do note that your lines are muted. In the handout section of the interface, you can download a PDF of today's presentation, and you can type in your questions into the control panel at any time. And yes, we are recording today's webinar. We'll be sending out a link to a follow-up email where you can view the recording as well as the associated handouts. Today, we'll be highlighting some of the things we do at Candid to create a quality experience for our participants and modeling engagement strategies that your organizations can do for your online events. The first tip of the day is ensuring that there's enough staff behind the scenes. This is why I'd like to introduce our support staff for today. I'd like to invite Catalina Spinel and Tracy Kaufman to turn on their webcams and say hello to our audience. Both Catalina and Tracy are program managers in our New York office, and they'll be supporting today's webinar with over 3,500 registrants, and they'll be fielding all of your questions behind the scenes. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my webcam now. Tracy, Catalina, feel free to do so as well. So with that, I do invite you to engage with us throughout today's presentation. I'd also like to take a moment to ground our conversation a bit further. We will be addressing the main themes that surface from the questions you submitted when registering for the webinar throughout today's session. We only have an hour together, so we won't be able to focus on every single type of event. Instead, we'll be discussing specifically meetings for membership organizations, networking opportunities, conferences, fundraising events as a response to COVID-19, and of course, workshops and trainings. This webinar is designed as a conversation because we're all learning together during this time. We will be sharing the experience of 3 different organizations, which we hope you can learn from and then take some lessons learned and adjust them for your organization's needs. We are aware that events come in many shapes and sizes, so the sky's the limit when it comes to what your nonprofit can create. We hope that today's conversation helps you find the virtual format that fits your mission and your donor landscape best. So before I hand this presentation off to our panel, we want to get a sense from the room what types of events you are planning or in the midst of transitioning to online. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. You should hopefully see a poll live on your screen. You can go ahead and make your selection. This one's a select all that apply poll. And then once you make your selections, you can click that submit button. Polls can be a great way to not only engage your audience, but they can also help focus a conversation. We recommend doing a poll or other interactive activities about once every 10 to 15 minutes to keep the energy up during your online training. It looks like I have about 15% of the room participating in our poll thus far, so I'll give everyone another moment to make their selections and then click that submit button. All right, so with about half of the room participating in the poll, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll and then share those results. All right, so it looks like about 70% of the room is here to discuss fundraising events. This is no surprise. This is definitely something that we anticipated. It also is great to see that about 50% of the room is here to talk about workshops and trainings. And we will also be addressing membership meetings, networking events, and conferences. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. This will help our panel tailor their commentary as we continue with today's presentation. Now I would like to introduce our panel. We are very excited to have, as I said, 3 different organizations with us today. Kicking off today's conversation is Taina Sanin and Alexa Salome of Nonprofit New York. I'm also excited to share that Juneth Mejia and Jen Meehan of Hispanics and Philanthropy are new additions to our panel. And wrapping up our conversation today will be Chris Bunting, our curriculum design manager here at Candid. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Taina and Alexa.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. I guess I will start, Alexa.
Take it away.
So quickly to just give a brief background about Nonprofit New York. We are a membership organization in the New York City area, servicing all the 5 boroughs plus Long Island and Westchester County. We have nearly 1,700 member organizations that span all budget ranges, all subsectors, and all of those counties, as well as like 1 or 2 other people who just really love us. But aren't necessarily in our service area. We've built a powerful nonprofit community, and we truly believe that we can do more good when we do it together. And our goal is to change New York and the world, right? New York City, New York State has a lot of international nonprofits as well. And so we truly believe that the work that we do expands out throughout the entire globe. And so today I am going to talk about membership meetings in particular. So next slide, please. So we're going to focus on critical events like membership meetings, where as part of the work that you do for your compliance really relies on having your members vote for things like your board. So I'm going to use Nonprofit New York as an example. We had our annual members meeting on at the end of March. And so we had about 2 weeks to turn around a meeting that was supposed to be in person and make it virtual. We were very lucky that we've also been through, for the last 3 years or so, we've been transitioning some of our trainings to webinars and doing them online. And so we already had a platform that we were using. And so we were able to kind of shift some of our online, some of our in-person things to our platform. We use Zoom. Zoom is really great because it also has a couple of capabilities, but there are various other platforms that folks can use. You're either using one now, or if not, if you want, we can send you a list of some of the other ones that we know. I really want to touch a little bit on voting and why that's so important and how we were able to get the votes that we needed for our membership meeting. Proxies are everything. Send those proxies out as soon as you have your topics for the vote. For us, it was our board slate. So in January, when we finalized the board members that we were going to ask our membership to vote in, we sent out proxies. And you can do those pretty easily. Create a slate, have your list, which of your wording, which literally was just you're giving our secretary, our board secretary, permission to vote on your behalf because you will not be there at the meeting. And then we PDF that and sent it out to everybody. And so you want to give folks enough time to receive it, sign it, and send it back. You can also do an online form, which was a little bit easier for us because we were able to get those responses immediately. Some form platforms allow you to do electronic signatures. We use Form Assembly, but there are others out there that you can just get someone to do a quick electronic signature, send that back to you. Folks can also print it out, sign it, email it back to you, mail it back to you. And what that does is it sets you up for the actual meeting, knowing that you have a certain percentage of your membership's votes in order to pass whatever topic or whatever issue that's going to be part of the meeting. I won't go too in depth about how to set up these meetings. I feel like everyone's going to be talking about that. What I do want to spend some time on is sponsorship alternatives and how we were able to kind of shift our sponsorship opportunities and keep the bulk of our sponsors for a meeting that went from being half a day to being about an hour and a half long. So some sponsorship alternatives that we did included allowing our sponsors to participate in the meeting itself. So things like being part of the panel, if you do have a panel for your meetings or your conferences or your events, doing an introduction for your meeting to just welcome everyone, to say hello, including a short video, 1 or 2 minutes long. We did that for our title sponsor. They had like a 2-minute video that we played at the meeting itself, right? And so those are ways, those are other things that you can offer your sponsors in order to make them feel like they're getting the most bang for their donation, and to also keep them engaged. We also did our standard marketing, so our social media pushes. We also allowed our sponsor to do a follow-up email. So our thank you email also included messaging and language from our sponsor. And so little things like that where they don't necessarily have like an exhibit hall anymore where they can meet folks face to face, but the ability to actually participate in the meeting was actually really really useful and kind of something that they really wanted. And so we went for that and we allowed that to happen. There are other things that you can do in terms of sponsorship. If your platform allows for breakout rooms, you can do breakout rooms and have a sponsor get a breakout room. You can also do goodie bags where you can put the things in and physically mail those out to folks before the event happens. And then some things to consider when you're doing membership meetings is accessibility, making sure that folks can not only log into the platform that you're using, but also be able to call in, and then getting questions, because I know some membership meetings are open floor, and so they allow folks to bring topics to the meeting for your folks to vote on, particularly trade associations do this. My advice is to get all of those in advance and incorporate it into the meeting agenda itself. So that way you give folks the voices that they usually get when they're in person, without them feeling like they are just there and they're just listening and they do one vote and then that's it. So that's my advice for membership meetings. again, we are a membership organization, so I've been talking to folks about this for the last several weeks. So if there are any questions about that, please feel free to ask. And I'm going to turn it over to Alexa to talk about how we transitioned our trainings from in-person to online.
Thanks, Taina. If we could have the next slide, please. So hello, everyone. My name is Alexa Salome. I'm the Learning and Resources Manager at Nonprofit New York. And as Taina mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about workshops and trainings. Our Learning and Resources program is one of the main offerings, or yeah, one of, for our members and non-members that Nonprofit New York provides. And prior to COVID-19, we were offering upwards of 3 learning opportunities in person every week. So when things started to shut down in the city, we had to figure out how do we keep offering our trainings. We, as Taina mentioned, already had Zoom, so we just decided to go all in, double down, and start offering as many rather than canceling events, trying to transition them to being a webinar instead. So part of what that entailed is most of our trainings are facilitated by outside instructors, so they're not on our staff. So this meant that we had to get in touch with all of those folks that were going to be presenting with us, let them know about the transition, offer them a training if they weren't familiar with Zoom, and then start a communication and education campaign through our marketing department about, you know, we're going to be online now. This is what this means. Here's how you can still continue to get all of the education and training that you're used to from us. Here's how we're going to offer it now. So it's just a lot of like heavy communication to start, and then as people start to get used to it, you see that there are a lot of systems that can remain pretty similar. One of the questions that I hear a lot, and one of the things that was a big concern for us was how do you maintain and create engagement? When you're used to doing stuff in person, it feels easier to have a conversation because you're face to face or you're in the same room with somebody. How do you maintain that feeling when everybody's sitting in front of their computer in a different room? My advice for that is, depending on the size of your group, if you want to take advantage of something like using webcams and want to allow your participants to have their webcams on, sometimes that can be a really great way just to like still see someone else's face and maintain that personal feeling. It usually helps people pay attention. If that's not an option, another thing that you can do that I recommend doing anyway is taking regular breaks in the middle of your presentation for Q&A. As opposed to being in person, it's really hard for folks to stay like locked in, paying 100% attention on a webinar for an hour if you're just blasting through content. So make sure you're taking regular pauses to ask for questions, have a discussion, get into anything if it's not clear. As far as engagement, you can also do things like we saw demonstrated here today. Take polls, take advantage of things like if there's a chat function, if there's opportunities for people to write, or you want to create space for people to be able to unmute themselves and speak. Anything that you can do like that in sort of a controlled setting is going to really help keep people's attention and keep the quality of the learning strong. The last thing I want to leave you with for this topic before I hand it over is just to keep in mind what the opportunities are from being virtual. It can be really easy to say like, oh, this would be so much easier if we were all in person, or think about the things that you're not able to do because you can't be face to face. Try to keep the perspective of what can you do, what can you do now that you weren't able to do before. Like I'll say, personally, for our trainings, now that we're doing webinars, we have the capacity to allow almost twice as many people in to an individual workshop as we would have when we were in person. We also have the capability to record a session and make it available at a later date if someone's not able to join us at the exact time that it's happening. So being virtual has meant a lot of improvements in terms of accessibility and just being able to further our reach in terms of each individual workshop or training. So maybe this wasn't part of the plan in the first place, but this does create an opportunity to sort of expand programming in a direction that you might not have been thinking about before. So definitely try to look for those positive opportunities. And that's it for me for now. I'll turn it over to our colleagues at HIP.
Thank you so much, Taina and Alexa. Really great tips there. I very much appreciate the insights on kind of looking for those new opportunities. That's definitely something that we've been doing here at Candid, and I know Chris will speak to a little bit more later in the presentation. With that, I'd love to invite Jen and Junip to kind of give us their part of the presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm Jen. I'm the Associate Director of Communications at HIP. Hispanics in Philanthropy is a transnational network of foundations, donors, and nonprofits making impactful investments in the Latino community in order to strengthen our leadership, influence, and equity. I will let Junweth say a little bit about HipGive and then jump into our events.
Thanks, Jen. Well, I am the HipGive program manager. Well, can we move into the next slide, please? Thank you. Well, HipGive is the first and still the only bilingual crowdfunding platform focused on Latino social impact projects promoting philanthropy across the Americas. HipGive was created by HIP 6 years ago and has channeled to more than 900 Latino nonprofits across 17 countries, more than $2.8 million, with the support of over 22,000 donors. Can we move to the next slide, please? So Jen can start sharing some of the insights and lessons we have learned.
Gracias, June. So I'm actually going to go a little bit out of order, sorry, and start with our conference, which I'll actually just touch upon briefly, seeing that most people are interested in fundraising. So we have had an annual conference for over 30 years now. This will be our first time doing it virtually. A lot of research was required in order to do the transition. We didn't want to just have Zoom webinars throughout the day. We wanted to find a way to maintain that look at that cohesive feel and that space that you get when you're attending a conference. So we ended up choosing Pathable, which gave us that opportunity. And we were really lucky to have all of our sponsors stay on. Not only did they stay on, but they stayed on at the same level. Part of that is they are longstanding repeat sponsors. We have great relationships with them. So they were more than happy to continue supporting us. The one difference that we're having in terms of recognizing them is allowing them to create digital booths, which again is part of the choosing or the decision that led us to choose Pathable. They'll be able to upload videos, promote themselves, share whatever they want with attendees. And similarly to Nonprofit New York, we'll have a sponsor lead one of our workshops. So that's, again, a virtual change that we wouldn't really have done in person. My biggest takeaway piece of advice when it comes to the conference is to focus on the purpose and not the platform. So regardless of your event, keep that purpose as a guiding light and make sure that that's coming through, because ultimately, whether it's done via phone, in person, wherever, virtually, Zoom, all these things, if you focus on the purpose, people are going to get the same out of it. So for us, that means providing great content and focusing on building our collective power. I'll just quickly touch upon engagement because both Elizabeth and Taina touched upon this. But again, breakout rooms, if you're having large panels, that provides attendees the opportunity to engage with each other. Polls like we had earlier. We have, we're doing Tiburon Tank for the second year, which is our version of Shark Tank, and will allow people to vote. We also suggest that people participate, as Candid is showing, that you have someone in the chats and the comments really engaging with people in real time. And another important thing for us is we've gotten consistent feedback from attendees year over year that what they want is more opportunity for network. Just because we're going virtual, we're not going to take that away. So we're setting up a small or multiple small thematic rooms that will allow people to network prior to our sessions. So based on theme, you'll sign up early, know that the other people in the room share the same interests, want to talk about the same topic, and there will be a max capacity so people actually have the opportunity to chat with each other. This is happening in a couple of weeks, actually, so we'd love to have you guys join. You can judge for yourselves on how we did the transition. And next, I will touch upon online fundraising quickly. So for May 5th, which is Giving Tuesday now, we were the beneficiaries of Altísimo Live, which was a fundraising concert. I know a lot of people had questions about how to jointly do an event and an online event and online fundraising. Key takeaway, you have to frequently remind people that you're doing this event in order to raise funds. We had speakers mention the text to donate option. We had people in monitoring comments sharing the link to post, which is another important thing. We created a unique landing page, farmworkers.hipgive.org. I think it's pretty easy to remember. If you don't have the capacity to build a new landing page, at least make a really easy bit.ly that you can say and someone can type in easily. But again, it might sound crazy, it might feel overwhelming, but repeat over and over again that this event is for a cause. And we saw also the greatest success in moments where people really showed passion and it felt a little bit more intimate. So one of our speakers, Kate del Castillo, chatted with a farm worker live, and the comments immediately showed how impacted people who were viewing were, and we saw a rush in our text to donate. So we really managed to mobilize a community there. Using our platform HipGive, actually, and I'll let June share a little bit more on the success of that and workshops.
Yes, thanks, Jess. As Jen has mentioned, on May 5, we raised over $120,000 via text to pledge from over 2,000 donors. What we did actually is to connect mobile cost text fundraising technology and link it directly to the HipGive fundraising page of farm workers. Right now, the campaign is still going on, and so far, the farm workers have raised over $1.9 million, and up to $400,000 have came from 6,000 donors in the HipGive platform. So in these terms, this means if you are making some online fundraising in an event, make sure you have enough capacity in the servers to receive the traffic to your website or donation button or any technological tool you are using, so everybody can complete the donation and don't lose the moment. So, and moving next to the last point around workshops and trainings, we are also really happy to share with you some elements that you can overcome successfully this shift from in-person to online events. By the end of 2019, we had planned to provide in-person trainings with different stakeholders across 4 different states for approximately 30 people per event in sessions of days of 7 hours. This was meant to be a workshop. So then COVID-19 happened and we realized we couldn't adapt just the platforms. So we decided to shift the design and the content as it was designed for in-person workshops and start thinking in creative ways in which we could provide quality content and great experience so people could concentrate and have peer learning. So for this, first, we changed the narrative. The workshops turned into a virtual bootcamp of 4 days. Each day of 1 hour session, we use Zoom as our technological tool tool to provide this virtual bootcamp. Second, we also develop a digital workbook so people can follow up easily all the sessions from the virtual bootcamp, and at the same time making notes and filling the corresponding sections. At the end of, for example, of all these sessions, we ask the attendees to realize a small exercise from the workbook, thinking in their project and in their nonprofit. And at the end, next day, we will be reviewing what they have done. So in that way, we will link all the content sessions with the digital workbook. But now, for that instance, we might think that not be enough. And our continual question was how we can turn this into a participatory session so we can have everybody connected. Then we decided to use Slido and integrate it with Google Slides, which is a tool that allows people to interact through questions, both for the questions they like the most, when make polls during the sessions. And also regarding these workshops and training, my last couple of advices will be, in order to maintain these value and communications, start creating short videos to communicate instead of written emails. This will make you differentiate the content and stay connected with your audience. Also, create materials to spread the word with key messages and graphics for stakeholders, because from my perspective right now, more than ever, toolkits, well, digital toolkits are pretty essentials on these days. And last but not least, technology needs to be our best ally. So create infographics or look for content if you are using any technological tools, because there will be people that might have problems accessing to them. So show them step by step how to do it. So this will be most of our key insights and lessons learned we have had during these past months. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much. And now we are handling over Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Jen and Juneth. I really love the lessons learned. Polls are definitely something that we are a big fan of here at Candid. So I do want to do one final poll before I do hand this over to Christine. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. And we want to know, how long are the events that you are looking to transition to an online medium, whether it's, an hour or two, perhaps you are thinking of a full day. And if it was a multi-day session, we want to know that as well. So I'll give everyone a moment or so to make their selections. Again, this is a select all that apply because we do realize everyone's work is a little bit different. Us here at Candid, we do a bit of all of these on here. So I know if Candid folks are on the line, they're selecting all of the above. I'll give everyone another moment or so to make their selections before I close the poll and share them with our panel. I know Christine is most interested in our results here, so one more second. All right, so hopefully everyone should be seeing the results now. It looks like about 70% of the room here is thinking about those shorter 1 to 2 hour events. There is about a third of the room that is thinking about a half-day session. And I love seeing that there are still folks on here who are thinking through multi-day events, which I know Chris will be able to speak to as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hide those results so we can continue with our presentation. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on this panel, and it's great to already be hearing other people who have been dealing with similar things that we've been thinking about at Candid, from engagement to how do we really have people in a virtual space when we've been bringing together people in person. So another thing that I see again and again is that people are hungry for community. So I'll just say it's great to already be in community with all of you, to be seeing how we're all thinking through similar challenges. So yeah, for the next slide, it speaks to the poll that Elizabeth raised. of how long are the events that you're transitioning online. Looked like 1 to 2 hours was by and far the most. We have run the whole gamut, and I'll definitely speak to all of those, but knowing that the majority of the room is thinking about 1 to 2 hours, I certainly wrote that down here. So as you see on this slide, the old way that we were doing a lot of trainings is gathering in person to learn and network. And this took a few different flavors. Next bullet will show you that one thing that we were doing is a 3-day proposal writing boot camp. So we would bring people together 8 hours a day for 3 consecutive days and train people on how to write grant proposals. We can't do that in a world of COVID. We also had half-day workshops where people would come together to learn and to network, and finally leadership circles that met in person monthly. So we had to think about a new way. And the new way, of course, was gathering online to learn and network, which you'll see on the next slide. So we took the 3-day proposal writing bootcamp and turned that into a 3-week virtual proposal writing bootcamp. Our half-day workshops became virtual workshops, and our leadership circles, we transitioned to meeting online. So, and these are all things that we had never done before. It was great to hear earlier in parallel to Nonprofit New York, we were also offering in-person trainings regularly, multiple each week across the country. And we had many scheduled for March and April and beyond, and we had never offered any of these online. So we had to pivot very quickly, which speaks to the next slide. We faced 3 challenges that I imagine many of you are also facing. The first one is time. We had to pivot quickly. We had registrants for in-person March events, and we wanted to continue, those folks to continue learning with us and continue engaging with us. So we had to think about time. Also already, both organizations that have already presented have talked about engagement. How can we keep people engaged, keep people interested online? We were certainly trying to think about that because we have really interactive in-person sessions. And third, last but not least, I think really importantly, is recognizing that we need to support our trainers. You know, that we are asking a lot of our facilitators, a lot of our trainers who are dynamos and who are game to transition to teaching in a new way online. And we really wanted to think about how to support our trainers, how to support our internal folks as we transition to new ways of teaching and facilitating. So I can speak a little bit to how we did this. Already we heard from earlier, starting with purpose. I think that was HIP, echoing HIP. Start with purpose and then consider the platform. So we really started by thinking about what do we want participants to do in these sessions. And internally at Candid, if folks have worked with me on trainings, they'll know that I'm a big fan of learning outcomes, because they'll state, especially Bloom style learning outcomes, what exactly we want people to do and to get out of that session and what we want to be able to observe them doing in the session. So we looked at our trainings and we knew we wanted people to be able to do a few things in our sessions. 1 is connect with their peers. 2, learn from experts. 3, get feedback on their work. And 4, learn together on their own schedule. So that was a lot. The first 3 are ones that we always were offering in our in-person sessions. People could network, they could learn from Candid experts, and they could get feedback on their work. Number 4, learn together on their own schedule, was really in many ways new for transitioning online, because we had to think about the fact that we couldn't have people for 3 days consecutively on an 8-hour Zoom call each day. It just is not practical. So we really had to think about how can people learn on their own schedule for some of this, and how can we come together and really leverage that time together. So once we had these 4 goals, our purpose, we thought about the platform. So connecting with peers. If we want people to connect with peers, how do we want them to do that? We want to find a platform where they can connect one-on-one and in small groups. We want them to learn from experts. What does that look like? We need short lectures with Q&A. We want them to get feedback, so the platform needs to allow them to turn in assignments that we can give them feedback on, and also for us to have small groups where we give feedback. And fourth, learning together and on their own schedule. This became a blended learning approach for us. And on the next slide, I speak very briefly to what this means. A blended learning approach is a combination of live meetings and self-paced content. So if we go back to a training that is 3 days long, 8 hours a day, we can't have that 24-hour Zoom call. Or even some of you who are planning, who have traditionally half-day sessions, it probably would be pretty deadly to have 1 4-hour webinar or call with folks. So you might want to think about, do you break that out into 2 separate offerings, or do you take a blended approach? So we took a blended approach for our half-day and longer offerings. And what this means is really prioritize interactivity during our times together, during our 1.5 to 2 hours together. So small peer groups, icebreakers, people networking, Q&A. That's what we did in our live meetings. And then the self-paced content is really where people can learn on their own time. So for example, short video instruction or text, instructional text that they can then read and answer short quiz questions to assess their learning, and also drafting and submitting those assignments. So something to consider if you have longer trainings that you're looking to translate online. A few folks have talked about live meeting engagement strategies, so I won't spend too much on this, but just briefly, polls. There are a few ways you can use this. One is to get a sense of the room, as we have a few times today. And I'll just also flag it allows for anonymity. So if you're going to ask a question that maybe people would be nervous to answer in chat or to raise their hand virtually, this could be a way for everyone to answer a question and have a little safety there. Chat, breakout rooms. We have used Zoom for breakout rooms. Also shared documents for collaboration where everyone can type in, for example, Google Doc. And a bonus tip, not on the slide, is if a platform includes them quick reactions like a clap emoji or a thumbs up, you could quickly ask people to use some of those reactions to let you know their thoughts. Next slide. Just a reminder to remember to break the ice, even if you are online. And for many of the same reasons we do it in person, to warm up the room, to allow people to get to network and get to know each other, but also to practice with technology. So an icebreaker is a lower stakes moment than maybe your actual meat of your training or your workshop or even your fundraiser, where people can practice with the technology, typing in the chat, using a breakout room, getting to know each other. So just flagging that, and feel free to keep it fun. We like to ask a fun question like, what is your superpower? That could be something people discuss in small groups or one-on-one or even in the chat. So I'll leave you with 3 lessons learned from our experience over the last 3 months or a few months, however many months it's been. Does anyone know what time is anymore? I don't know. First lesson is create low stakes opportunities to practice. I mentioned earlier that we really recognized that we were asking our facilitators to think and to work in a totally new way and to work with technology that was new to many of us. So we created low stakes room for people to practice with technology, to share lessons learned. It was really a way for people to learn from each other. You know, hey, I tried Slido in this way last week. This part worked great. This part I do differently. What do you guys think? Oh, I use breakout rooms. Let's try breakout rooms right now. These have been weekly Friday afternoon sessions. I was afraid people were going to probably be dead from the week, but they've been really lively and low stakes ways for our facilitators to practice with technology and with online facilitation before they share it in rooms of 1,000 people or 50 people. And also create that same low stakes opportunity for your participants early in the training for them to try out chat, use platform functionality. As you have witnessed in this training, divide and conquer is happening right now. So we have Catalina, we have Tracy, we have Elizabeth, all behind the scenes making this webinar happen right now. So think about, especially if you're going to have a larger event, how you're going to divide and conquer that event and what roles you'll have. Number one, you'll have somebody who's on the stage, as it were, a lead facilitator, or if it's a fundraising event, maybe an MC. Next bullet. You can also have presenters or small group facilitators for those smaller groups. And as we have in the back end right now, people monitoring chat and answering questions as they come in. We've seen this is especially important the larger your presentation gets or your event gets. And the last two, having someone to track questions and then choose which questions to ask, as I am sure Elizabeth and Catalina and Tracy are prioritizing right now as we speak, and having someone who's the tech go-to. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, I can't hear the presentation, I can't see the slides, that you have someone who is designated to field those questions. And last, but I think most importantly right now, our third and final lesson, people are hungry for connection. So as you're thinking about your fundraising, as you're thinking about your trainings, as you're thinking about your conferences, think about how people can connect with each other in meaningful ways and how you can use a platform to do that. So I'll leave you with that and turn it back over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Christine, and to our entire panel. We are now going to shift over to questions, and as Chris alluded here, we have been prioritizing. We're going to do our very best to get to as many of them as possible, but we do have over 1,700 folks on the line right now with plenty of questions. So do bear with us if we do not get to the question that you submitted. We do have our online librarians at grantspace.org/askus, and we'll drop that link in the chat momentarily. And those are our coworkers here at Candid, trained librarians, one of who just got her master's in information and library sciences, so they will do their very best to help research the best answers for you. As we start with the chat here, I'm going to go ahead and start with a question that came in from Jen. And Jen is sharing that she works with federal employees as part of the combined federal campaign. They are looking at ways to do virtual trainings for volunteers, charity fairs, and other campaign awareness fundraising events. They're struggling with what platform to use that will work with their various firewalls. Anyone have experience with an audience that does have those virtual limitations or virtual meetings? Christine, I'll start with you for this question, just because I know we've had many conversations about how to choose what platform for what experience, and then I'll let the rest of our panel jump in to answer.
Sure, I can take a first stab at that. I think the thing I would do if I were thinking about this is work with my internal tech folks to get kind of the technical requirements that are needed for these firewalls internally, and to ask for demo sessions with the platforms that you're considering, and see if you can replicate the conditions that you would actually use for a live session. I think this definitely goes back to speaking to that low stakes opportunity. If there is a way that you can practice in a demo setting to replicate what you would do before you do it live with hundreds or thousands of volunteers on the line.
Any of our other panelists have any recommendations here?
This is Jen. I'll jump in quickly. And this is, from working at home, I've learned this through my partner, but using a tool that is part of a suite that you already use, for example, Microsoft Teams, is, if you're already using Microsoft products, is an easy way to not have to deal with firewalls. So just looking at to what tools you're already using that provide good security.
Thank you. Our next question here comes from Dale. Dale is sharing that they've had, pretty good success transitioning their education programming, but they've been discussing the possibility of canceling a major nonprofit fundraising event, a gala, recognition dinners, etc. These normally host over 700 guests, and they're really stumped with how to transition this. So I'll position this for HIP here. How did you decide that virtual was the right way to go? And how did you know that the conference would still provide the value that these guests are used to getting, such as at galas or recognition dinners or anything similar?
Sure. It was definitely a tough decision because our conference is usually around 400 or 500 people in person from all over the country and even Latin America. But at the same time, and this is kind of something that Alexa said as well, this provided us the opportunity to actually include more people. It's already a large event, but some people don't have the ability to travel or wouldn't be able to afford the hotel in LA or for a variety of reasons. This is providing more accessibility. And another main factor in making that transition was that for us, it's an opportunity to connect with people that we might not necessarily work with on a daily basis. Transitioning it to virtual allows us to keep those connections. And like I said, we're finding some ways to maintain small networking circles, but we didn't want to let a year go by without finding a way to connect with each other. So again, as was mentioned, the purpose remained the same, and just because we had to change the platform, we didn't want to cancel it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Jen. I'll start with Nonprofit New York for the next question, but again, feel free to let us know what recommendations you have, or again, we're all still learning, so if there's any other recommendations from the panel, I would appreciate it. JR is asking about accessibility. If and when possible and relevant, if you can discuss options, challenges, opportunities for making these online engagements more inclusive for the deaf or hard of hearing participants, potentially even blind, if that is something that the panel has recommendations for. Taina, I know that you mentioned having a phone call option, which unfortunately we do not have available today just due to the volume of participants that were interested in this session. But I'll start with you in terms of what has Nonprofit New York considered, what have you struggled with, what opportunities have been present, and then Chris, if you could add to this as well, because I know Candid has been working on some of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of accessibility, some of the things you can do is some platforms allow you to do closed captioning. And so being able to add the text to your event, whether it is a conference or gala or training, these things tend to be a little bit easier if you already have a deck and if you already know what you're going to say, because you can pre-populate a lot of it. But then also you can add the closed captioning after the fact, especially if you've recorded the event and then share it afterwards. Again, allowing folks to do the phoning in is also really key. For us, what we've seen from ourselves as well as from some of our members is that the amount of information you send out beforehand is really critical and super useful for the actual day of, right? And so as much as the attendees can know is happening, whether it's an agenda or allow them to send things in advance, allows you to prep for some of the questions. So if someone thought they were going to be fine and then the day of their internet goes down or they're having sound issues, they know that their questions that they're like burning questions that they've had has already been submitted and that the presenters or the host has it and will very likely answer that question. 100% agree with Chris about dividing and conquering. Make sure that you have enough admin support for the events that you're doing, so that way you can get as many of the questions answered and help as many people as possible the day of and during the session, right? I think for us, we've really made an effort to be as accessible as possible, you know, in terms of where we have our events, how we share information, and how we make information available. You can't do all the things all the time, but making sure that you do as much as you can goes a long way. I don't know if Alexa, you have any thoughts, or if you missed something in terms of training.
No, I think you pretty much covered everything. The only other thing I was gonna say, and this hasn't changed from when we were in person, but when we to your point, Taina, about sending out as much information as you can in advance of the session, with those communications, we always include the email of a staff member. It's usually mine, so that if somebody does have any additional like questions or specific needs or requirements that they want to bring to our attention, that we can make sure that, you know, we're seeing that and preparing to respond accordingly.
Thank you both. I do want to share some upcoming opportunities with our participants here. If you would like to experience one of these new virtual workshops that Chris spoke to, as well as learn how to cultivate individual donors, we do invite you to join us on May 26th for our 8 steps for cultivating relationships with individual donors. And on June 11th, we'll also have a live webinar that will focus on how you can continue engaging your donor base during this crisis. Links for both of these trainings will be provided in the chat momentarily, and I'll show them here on the screen as well in case you wanted to look into them. But I also wanted to continue with our Q&A. Another great question that I will pose to HIP first, but I would like the entire panel to comment here, is from Noelle. And Noelle would like to know if we see this transition to virtual events as some form of permanent option for the future, or do we see this as a blend, part physical, part virtual, or do we anticipate that most organizations will return to simply having physical events when it's safely to return to that option? We'll go ahead and we'll start with HIP, and then we'll go to Nonprofit New York, and then we'll close out with Chris on this one.
Great question. I think I envision a blend. I think certain things might continue to be done online, at least in the entertainment aspect or larger panels, which to be honest, we were already doing when we had a large plenary, we would stream it on Facebook Live. So I think those kinds of things will continue to happen. I'll let June speak to this more, but I think trainings and workshops might see a bigger shift back to in person, but I'll let June jump in.
Yes, for us also it will be a blend, because what people like the most of attending an in-person workshop is this space for networking and actually getting to know better the facilitator and have spaces to speak about some other questions or ideas they have. But actually, these moments have led us to improve the way in which we engage virtually and to improve our materials and the way in which we communicate digitally. So from my perspective, we could not lose this physical contact with, or in-person contact with the attendees, but for sure this make us improve the way in which we handle digital webinars.
Yeah, I think for us as well, we definitely see it being a hybrid. We have been talking about doing e-learning for a very long time. and COVID just happened to give us the kick that we were apparently waiting for in order to launch these e-learning opportunities. And we've always done webinars, but knowing that we can do them and that they are accessible and they are successful, I think we are going to continue to do some of those, but we definitely have some trainings, particularly the ones that are multi-day long, where the in-person aspect of it was actually a really key critical piece. And so we would definitely want to go back to that format. Maybe we do a hybrid where we have some in-person and some online opportunities. I know for me, in terms of membership, the bulk of my events are networking opportunities for our members. And so although we could do those online, it's also really nice to just kind of see someone and be near another human being. I can imagine that a lot of our folks would love to be invited to something where they can actually leave their house and wear something other than their pajamas all day. And so for us, it's a hybrid. We will keep some of the things that we've learned and some of the innovation that we've done, and for others, we will go back to doing in person.
Great, thank you both. I realize that we are a minute over time, but Chris, I did want to get your thoughts on this question.
Sure, and I'll just briefly plug respectability.org. They had a series of webinars on creating accessible events in social media. So if folks are looking for that in response to the last question. In response to this final question, I'll echo, what all of the other panelists have already said, that I think this is going to be a blend, but I'll also say that this moment has really challenged us to reconsider how we do training and what purpose our training and all of our events and our networking, just what purpose do these things serve, and what do our participants, what does our audience really need? So I think it's still too early to say in a lot of ways what will be blended and what will be a blend of in-person versus totally online, as we see what people are kind of hungry for and in demand for and how we can reach folks. I think one thing that I'm starting to think about is how we can create learning communities that continue conversations that may start in person or may start on a Zoom call. How can we create spaces for people to continue to network and learn and knowledge share together? So I think that's the next step here at Candid, is thinking about how we'll create that. But yeah, it's a new era.
Absolutely. And of course, in the spirit of sharing some tips here, the last pro tip that I do have for everyone here today is to create an opportunity for participants to stay engaged with you after the event. As you close out the training, encourage participants to keep in touch via social media and/or a newsletter. The event is just one of the many instances to connect with your audience and donors, and there always needs to be engagement before and after an event takes place. So if you do want to keep in touch with us here at Candid on our upcoming programs and new resources that we're putting out there, you can certainly follow our newsletter here as well. With that, thank you so much to our panel today. Taina, Alexa, Juneth, Jen, Chris, fantastic information. And thank you for everyone for taking some time out of your day to join us and stay with us a few minutes over. Rest assured that you will receive a follow-up email within 2 business days with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, as well as a short survey. On behalf of our team here at Candid, thank you so much for joining us today. If you like this webinar, we do hope that you join us again soon. Be well, everyone, be safe, and have a wonderful rest of your day.